This is Loudspeaker.
Hi, and welcome to Connecting a Better World, where we spend time meeting some of the most incredible human beings who make this world a better place. We will learn how each individual took their ideas, mission, and purpose to create and serve others in business and organizations that surround social good, social entrepreneurship, and social impact, and find out how we, together, can further connect others to help. I am your host, Dr. Natalie Phillips. Today, I will be talking with Chrissanne Long, founder of a network called Bridge Local, created to help locals in her community connect. Started 10 years ago and out of the passion to help others, her Facebook community has grown to over 10,000 people. Chrissanne has connected to so many people doing meaningful work and has become an advocate for the voices of many entrepreneurs surrounding economic development, access to capital, procurement, and committed to developing a better community and world. So I am so excited. You know, our next guest that we have for the podcast is actually, I want to say, a really good friend. I just feel like we are, you know. It's been fun because a lot of my guests have been coming from Clubhouse, so you've heard me say this before. But it's so true. It's interesting because it is a social media app that is audio only. But we host a room every morning, and this woman shows up and just shares so much of herself. And it's like you have this community or family there. And so this is one of our members of our family because she shows up every morning and just shares so many stories and wisdom, and it's so much fun. So I want to introduce Chrissanne Long. Welcome to the show.
Hello. This is fun. I am enjoying the opportunity to be here with you today.
Awesome. Okay. So let's start off. You know, this is a show about just doing good in the world. So let's actually back up a little bit and start off by just introducing yourself to my listeners and tell me a little bit more about who you are. Like, what's your story?
Okay, so the quick answer is I'm Chrissanne Long, and I'm an entrepreneur. I live in Central Florida. The city I live in is Lakeland, and I live in the county of Polk County, which is right in between Tampa and Orlando. I started a business in 2009, so I'm not as much of a newbie as I sometimes feel to the entrepreneurial world. And before that, I was a teacher. I taught middle school English and reading in Polk County, you know, right here in where I live. And that's the quick answer. So I don't know where you want me to go from there. So I'll stop there.
Well, I know so much more about you. You know, you were an athlete. You know, I know that you have your own podcast show. So let's talk a little bit about what I love to get to is, you know, the heart of the show is really looking at people who are doing good in this world, right? And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you grew up and if you had some sort of role model or somebody that you looked up to that, you know, helped you create this heart of service.
So the only person that I can give credit to the heart of service is my mom. And, you know, I shared with Natalie and the family earlier this week about kind of where there was a troubled adolescence in my story. So I was a rebellious teenager. I don't know exactly why, except I think now I do, because there was always this entrepreneurial gene in me that was just wanting to be recognized and acknowledged and allowed to come out. But my mother was not entrepreneurial at all. She was a teacher, and so there was a lot of love, but there wasn't a lot of innovation. There wasn't a lot of risk taking. There wasn't a lot of, you know, doing a lot of things that were just not part of the plan. So that just didn't vibe well with my mom because I was a risk taker. I think it was just a natural genetic part of who I am. And so she always wanted me to be careful, and I was not. do you want me to tell the story that I kind of shared today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
that?
just sitting here listening, and we have so much in common because I played sports in high school too, and my mom was a teacher too, and I don't know if you knew that too. And like as you're speaking, I feel like you're telling my story too, because it's the same thing. And we had talked about this earlier this morning too, about just, and I think it's the generation even too of just not understanding how there are other things. Like it's not always the traditional, I go to school for this, I work, things like that. But there is this innovation, and there is this risk taking, and there is this actually risk taking to follow your dreams, right? And so I absolutely love your story. And yes, I would love for you to tell your story that you shared this morning.
Okay, so here's what happens. I really wanted to please my mom and do a lot of the things. I wanted to be all of the things that she wanted me to be. But I've always been very poor at math. And so I was in a math class. I was in an algebra class in high school, and I was going to fail. I mean, there was no real way that I could see myself passing. I had a tutor. Obviously, because I sucked at it, I didn't want to do it. So there was also that part of it. But I was definitely going to fail this class. And so I figured out what my teacher did every time we had a test. He had the test already written, and he would go over like the types of problems that we would be having, and then he would stick it in his desk, and then we would go to lunch. And so we went to lunch, and I kind of snuck back in a little bit early, and I was able to like open his desk, get the test, write down all the answers, stick the test back in, and then get out. And I got caught because I was dumb, and I told somebody that I had done it, and that person told on me, and that's how I got caught. The thing was executed perfectly. If I could have just kept my mouth closed, I would have passed the test, and everything would have been fine. But no. So I get suspended from school because I get caught, and my mother was a teacher, my stepfather was the administrator, my aunt, everybody in my entire family knew everything that I was doing. And so it was a big deal. It was like the gossip in the halls at the school where, Chrissanne Long got suspended. So when I did that, then I was on the softball team. And because I had been suspended, I wasn't able to play right after I got back from my suspension. So I did the suspension, but I also some friends decided to come over. They weren't really friends. I don't really know why they came over, but I let them in. That was dumb. And then my stepdad came home and busted me having friends over. So I compounded the problem. Not only did I get in trouble, but then I had friends over unsupervised. And so then I'm off of suspension. Softball is supposed to start. I need to go. I need to be on the bench, pay my dues for my stupidity. And my mom says she's not going to drive me to the game, which she was mad, and I understood, but she didn't tell me that I couldn't go to the game. So I grabbed my softball bag, my bat bag, those big long bags that you put your bats in, your glove, your uniform, your cleats, everything. And I just hopped on my 10-speed bicycle, and I'm riding my bike down the busiest street in our city. And I get to the game, and it's like nothing happened. I didn't tell anybody what I had done. I didn't say, I wasn't running away. I was just going to the softball game. So we're warming up. I'm not going to play, but there I am. And then the girl that I'm warming up with says something about there was a party that evening. And I'm thinking, I'm already in trouble. Why not? So instead of going home on the bike in the middle of the night, I ride my bike to the girl's house so that we could go to the party. And from that, I just call it the Great Big Rebellion. It was a long weekend. It was actually Easter weekend. And it ended up with my mother finding out from my brother, who lived in Montana at the time. He was able, and this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, and my brother was able to find me through a friend where I was staying and have the police come and haul me to juvenile detention. So I am now in front of a judge. I'm trying to abbreviate the story a little bit. I'm now in front of a judge, and the judge is asking me, so, young lady, why exactly do you think that, you're in trouble, and what's wrong and what's going on? Is there something going on at home? And I said, look, Your Honor, look at them. Look at them. They're here. They're all here. My mother, my father, my stepfather, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother, my counselor. My counselor is even here. And I said, Your Honor, the problem is they love me too much. With just this defiant look on my face, like, what a sin for them to love me so much. I'm suffocating. And so anyway, I ended up going home. My parents decided that I was going to live with my aunt and uncle for my senior year. So I went to Miami, and I graduated instead of my local school. I actually graduated from a Miami school. And yeah, so that was just that's the characterization of the young Chrissanne Long. Very rebellious, very wanting to try new things, not afraid. I mean, there was no fear in any of this. I mean, it's pitch black in the middle of the night and I'm on a 10-speed bike with a softball bag, riding along and who cares? But, so yeah, that was the story that I shared. And I think what has happened, from that for me is eventually I converted into an adult and the lessons that I have of that love that my family gave me and the love that my mom gave me unconditionally. Like, here I am, the biggest brat that you could possibly imagine, and yet the love was still there. There was no question. There has never been a question in my mind that my mother loved me, that my family was there for me no matter what. And so now, at the age of 34, I didn't decide. Life continued to be difficult for me, through a divorce, through infertility, through depression, through a lost job, through a lot of darkness that I continued to heap upon myself. It was poor decisions after poor decision after poor decision. But then at one point in time, my now husband kind of gave me an ultimatum. He goes, "There's light in you. You're a beautiful person, and when you're on, I love you. But when you're in the dark place, you're awful. I don't want to be around you. And so I'm leaving." Like, he sent me backpacking to my house, and we were broken up. And at that point in time, I was like, I need this guy in my life. I don't want him to be gone. I don't want this to be another one of my failures. I need to change. I need to do something different. So we had started a business together, and I made that my goal. My goal was I was going to make the business work or else. I don't know what else was going to happen. There were no other options. And so I committed to the business. I did everything that I could. And then about a year after our breakup, we were back together. And so the business was going on. The relationship was not. And he started to finally see that I was a reliable person that he could count on, that I wasn't going to continue the cycle. And so since then, I haven't looked back. But it's so funny to talk about that person that I was with this new person that is nothing like that. I mean, I'm completely different. I remember we were at a First Friday event in downtown, and a friend of ours who had been a part of the network that we're going to talk about saw me. She goes, "Chrissanne, I admire you. I admire you for your consistency." And I had to laugh at her because that was the first time in my life that anyone would have ever characterized me as being someone who was consistent. I was consistently a jerk, a brat, a failure, but not consistent in a positive way. So it was a turning point, and it's been fantastic to be able to turn what my mother taught me into the love, into loving others. And that's really where the giving back comes for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that story. So thank you so much for sharing it here for my listeners, because it really is. I mean, I love that. Hey, you had consistency, right? I mean, I remember listening to your story and I just kept yelling, "Stop it already. Like, stop sneaking out or stop doing that," but hey, you were consistent, right? You're like, "Hey, I'm already in trouble. I might as well do it." And, maybe that's where that strength came to now use it for good, right? And so I love that story. I love that your mom is intertwined as well. I love the being upset that you were loved too much to now changing it to, yeah, but I have so much in me now that I can give it to others and I can love other people, right? And serve other people. So, I absolutely love that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, you've created a network called Bridge Local. And it was, initially starting to just connect people in your community, right, to each other. So talk a little bit more about what Bridge Local is.
So it was originally called Lakeland Business Leaders because it was in Lakeland that I was trying to connect other businesses to one another. And I call it the story of throwing mud on the wall. So I took action. Like, I had this idea and I took action. And I didn't know what was going to come from it. I just had this urge, this desire to advance the process of networking and relationship building because I knew that social media could do that. So in the traditional world of networking, you meet somebody at a networking event, you exchange a card, you send them an email to say, "Hey, it was great to meet you." And maybe you see them at the next networking event, maybe you don't. Or maybe you run into them in some other time. And so your relationship ends at the moment that it starts because it might have been a great conversation, but unless someone just has the time or decides to take the initiative, the conversation isn't going to continue. With social media, you could start that conversation and start to build and strengthen the relationship almost instantaneously. And there was the opportunity with Facebook groups to make those connections not require people being friends. People were really resistant, especially at the beginning with Facebook. They were like, I don't want everybody all in my business. So the group gave people the padding to allow the relationships to exist, but not necessarily like, will you be my friend? And so, like I said, I threw some mud on the wall. And what I found was I was craving this kind of connection, but I was also met with a lot of people who were also craving that same kind of connection. So it was just a white space that nobody really realized was there. And then we filled it. And the joy that it has created for many people as far as being able to advance that networking, the relationship process, because you know that you have to be genuine and authentic in order to have a sustainable friendship or relationship with anybody. That's just how life works. And so what was taking years, months of, trying to close a deal could happen at a accelerated pace. And so people were just loving what we were doing. And so it continued to grow. Yeah. And at one point in time, it just it exploded, and everything was just starting to happen a lot faster than I thought it would ever.
And I love that too, because it's exactly like what you said. Number one, it's the consistency of showing up, right, using social media. And we know that, right? But it was that safe space where, like you said, you didn't necessarily have to be friends because you had the group, right? So, you could join in, you could kind of sit back and watch and engage with your comfort level, like how any social media works. And then you can watch. If people... over time, as people show up, you can tell if they're authentic or if they're not, right? I mean, it's got to come out at some point. Mm-hmm. And so having that safety net of being able to sit back and watch or participate and engage, creates a really good community for connecting quicker, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Is it still something that's just local, or has it grown now? Because you have a lot of people in that group. It is.
We have over 10,000 in the group, and it is not just businesses and entrepreneurs. It's also the public, the general public, because very early on, one of our early members, asked me, pointedly asked, Chrissanne, there is nowhere for B2C businesses to connect like we're connecting. So generally a networking event is B2B. You've got a lot of businesses networking with other business owners. And so they specifically ask, can we have this be open to consumers? And so the consumers are there asking for referrals and also maybe dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur someday at one point in time. And they have a network in which to do that, because if they say, hey, I've been a long time listener, first time, speaker, I can share with a group of people that are going to welcome them and receive them and with warmth. Excuse me. So I don't know where I was going to go after that. You were just asking, is it still local?
Yeah, is it still local?
Yeah, and it is. It's very big. There's a lot of people in it, but it is still not just. So the reason for the name change from Lakeland Business Leaders to Bridge Local was to take the geographical restriction out of it, right, and to open it up more to the entire county of Polk County.
I see.
So people weren't like, well, I'm not from Lakeland, I'm not going to join. Right. And so but it is still really hyper central Florida focused.
Yeah. So because you started it, are you noticing that you see other things in the future, whether it be, helping other entrepreneurs start something like this kind of connection, themselves, or do you feel like this is going to slowly kind of get bigger and bigger in the radius of who you're covering?
I think the vision now, so what ended up happening is I needed to find other people around the country doing something similar. Mm-hmm. But in 2010, when this launched, there wasn't really any conversation going on. And so I've just been constantly Googling community building, people who serve entrepreneurs, just trying to find my tribe of other people who were doing similar work and get ideas on how to do it better, how to innovate it, how to make it more efficient, maybe how to potentially scale some of the networking and the resources part of it, because it did turn into meeting in person types of things. There at one point in time, everybody's like, hey, this is great. We're all on Facebook, but when are we going to meet in person? And so then we started our networking events. And then from there, it was like, all right, the extroverts loved the big events. We'd have 100 people show up for our networking events. And then the introverts were like, can we have a breakfast? Could we have a lunch? So then we started, for a while, I was doing 9 events a month. It was a meet and greet at the end of the month and breakfast and lunch every week. One breakfast, one lunch every week. And it was the most fulfilling. I was exhausted, but it was the most fulfilling work that I've ever done, because you could just see the connections and you could see the businesses start to go from, I don't know anyone and I'm brand new kid on the block business, but they made the right connection and that person introduced them to the next person and the doors just started to open, and it was accelerating their business's growth in a way that I don't think anything else could have done for them.
Yeah. You see it on social media happening, right? Could you feel it in the community as you started to just be out and about? I mean, pre-COVID, obviously, but when you walked around, did you see more people that you knew and it was a little bit more friendlier, or did you see a change or shift in the community outside?
Well, I'm always told about my smile. So when I see people, I smile. I have a big, goofy smile. I'll tell a story about that if we have time.
Yeah.
So I'm the person exuding the warmth and welcoming people in to say hello to me and whatnot. And so since I had started this group, thousands of people that I had not met in person knew my face. And so they would start to say, are you Chrissanne? Are you Lakeland Business Leaders? And then, Bridge Local. And so it did start to spill out into the community in a way that was a little awkward at first, because I was Facebook famous and nobody that was not on Facebook knew what the heck it was going on. So there was this really interesting dichotomy between, those that got it and those that were just like, what are you talking about? But here's a funny story that there's our local economic development community head had hired a company called IDEO, to come into Lakeland and kind of start to talk about the design thinking process and how it can help with community building. And the design thinking people from IDEO were launched out into the city to go kind of just meet people. And they happened across one of our networking events when we were having setting one up. And they were like, what's going on here? And so the girl that was helping was volunteering. She's like, you need to meet Chrissanne. So I meet these people. And they asked me to attend an event for our local economic development organization. And I'm like, why do they want me there? And they said, because they don't know that you exist, and we need them to know that you exist. And I'm like, but I think that's exactly what they don't want me there for. So I find myself in this meeting with all of the incredible leaders of our community. And then there's me, like Facebook famous, who the heck is she? And it was a really interesting experience because they used the term the underground groups. They wanted to learn how to connect to the underground groups. And at that point in time, that's what I was. I was an underground group. And so I applaud them for doing the work to try and help people who were working underground. We weren't trying to work underground. We really wanted to be connected and start to be seen as relevant in the community. But it kind of does take sometimes that traditional mindset is, we have to ordain this as valuable or, relevant before it actually becomes relevant. So that was an important step for us to just, but it was just showing up. Like there wasn't any intentionality behind it. It was just like happenstance, accidentally, suddenly I'm in this room.
Well, and I think it's interesting too because I know a lot of people don't necessarily like to be like an influencer, right? And it's funny because when you are on social media, and I'm exactly like you in my audiology world too, I'll be walking around conferences and people will know my face and be like, oh my gosh, I know you from your shows, or I know you from Dead, and I'm like, thank you. I'm like, I don't know what else to say, but I totally get it. But, and I had this conversation with somebody about being an influencer, and it was actually about Clubhouse and how he hated it, right? And I was like, well, what exactly are you using it for? Or why are you not liking it? I mean, I'm not trying to talk you into it because it's not for everybody. And I said, but I'm just curious, and so we had the conversation about being an influencer. And I thought it was really interesting because I still think this guy's an influencer, even though he's not on social media, right? But it's different. And I think what they saw, the economic development people saw, was that you were an influencer and you had, right, the following per se. And I know for some people it makes it uncomfortable, but you do have this following and this community, I should say, or a community that has grown. And it's a trusted community, right? And so I think that it's really important to, whether it's above ground or underground or whatever it is, to combine that though, because I think that there's so much value in both, where you have these great conversations about developing your community around you, as well as developing almost like the emotional part of the community, right? And having that trust factor. I think that's super important. And
that culture is an important part.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So I talk a lot about the culture, and realizing businesses don't go into business to not be seen or to be invisible. So when we can create an ecosystem that allows them to walk into the room knowing I'm in a community that will help me succeed. I don't need people to help me succeed necessarily, but I do need the soil to be fertile, right? So that when I do plant my seeds, that the healthy soil is going to help me to grow and be able to produce healthy fruits. And so that is what, to me, is the conversation that has evolved for me since the very beginning, is now this ecosystem conversation that you just brought up.
Yeah, and I just think it's so important. What are you doing with your podcast? Don't you have a podcast as well?
Yes. Yeah. So I came kicking and screaming into the podcast world. My initial podcast host, his name is Rob Arturi. He also has some podcasts, and I'm in our podcast booth inside of my office. So it's like a studio. It's a 10 by 12, soundproof booth in here that we can do recording for video and audio podcasting and whatnot. But he approached me probably 2.5 years ago and said, "Chrissanne, you need to have a podcast." And I laughed at him. I'm like, I don't need to have a podcast. Nobody wants to hear me talk. And so we would have conversations, and he kept picking at it, like reminding me that, see, this would be a good conversation for us to have on a podcast. See, this would be a good. And so finally I relented and I said, okay, at one of our events, I said, okay, guys, I'm saying it out loud on the record. I'm going to let Rob work me into having a podcast. We're going to do it. And so we came up with the name Elevate Polk, and he was an entrepreneur at the time. Now he has moved on, and he's now working at our regional hospital. So he kind of left the podcast to me. So when we started it, it was really like, how do we bring all of the great things that are going on in Polk County related to everything into the podcast? And since Rob has left, I asked him, as he was leaving, I was like, would you mind if I shifted the focus more toward where my heart is, which is the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Polk County? And so now the podcast is 100% focused on the entrepreneurial journey of Polk County entrepreneurs and the ecosystem. And so I'm looking for show guests that want to come in from across the country that are entrepreneurial ecosystem builders, that can talk about what's going on in their communities, that our local listeners would start to hear and go, oh, wow, we could do that here. Because right now we're just kind of in a silo, like getting our own ideas from our own community, and entrepreneurship is so much more than that. So I'm trying to advance that conversation.
Are you finding a lot of people? Now, I know that I sent a really good friend over to you, just learning about what you're doing, but are you finding a lot of people that are focused on building these ecosystems across the country or world even?
There is an entire movement. So when I finally remember I told you that I had started Googling things a long time ago, trying to find community builders and whatnot. And at one point in time, I think it was on a Medium post, that I found someone talking about community building and local entrepreneurs. And somehow I found this post. And the term entrepreneurial ecosystem builders was described. And it was almost like someone had described me. And I said, oh my gosh, there's finally a place for me. There are people having this conversation, legitimately having this conversation. And it came out of Kansas City at the Kauffman Foundation. And so I just started religiously following everything that was coming out of the Kauffman Foundation. They have something called an eShip Summit. I think they've had it for the past 4 or 5 years. And they have an entire list of goals for entrepreneurial ecosystem builders so that we can all use the same vernacular and the same language in our communities so that eventually it starts to resonate across the board.
Wow.
And so, yes, there are a lot of people
Yeah, and I think it's
doing
so
this
great.
work.
Okay, that's so cool because I've met that one person here in my hometown, you know, that I met with. And it was so funny because I remember he called me up and scheduled an appointment with me, and I had no clue who he was. And I said, okay. So I sat down. And I just kept looking at him going, what are you doing? Like, what are you building? What are you growing? You know, and he explained it to me and I got it after that, you know, and that's why when I met you, I was like, oh my gosh, you've got to connect to this guy. Right. But it's interesting because I feel like if there wasn't, like I could see as you're starting to develop these processes, and I know you're a process person too, like how nice it would be to teach that to a leader in a certain area to start growing. But it sounds like there's a lot of people, hopefully at least learning or on the same path and journey as you are, to make sure that these entrepreneurs who sometimes we call ourselves solopreneurs, right? Because you just feel like, number one, it's, you know, you've got your one business and you're like literally focused this way on it. And you don't have time to look up to see that there are other people right next to you that are probably going the same way that you are. And if you could just kind of talk about it, collaborate, things like that, like how much easier it would be for you, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of times they don't, like you have your hometown, like where you live. And I'm sure you network in real life when there isn't a pandemic. And so you have those relationships, but your connections go so much further than that. Like all of the people that you're connected to through your social media, through all of that. And so you're not hyper focused necessarily on those connections at home. You know, you've got an online brand and you have your home-based business, or not home-based business, but your business that is in your hometown. But what we fail to realize is, like you said, we're busy doing our work. We're in our business. The nose to the grindstone is very real. And so for entrepreneurs who are not social media connected or wanting to get into the space that you and I are in, they don't have that network. I mean, they don't know how to build it. They don't have the resources to go and say, okay, well, I'm going to go jump in this Facebook group and I'm going to start to build relationships. And so they just feel like they are alone. They literally feel like there isn't anybody there who understands them, who will help them, who cares to help them, to listen to their challenges, or could help them maybe save a buck or two, avoiding some horrible pitfall that, you know, 99% of entrepreneurs who have gone down the path could have told them if they had just had somebody to ask.
Right. So and
that's the work. That's what I get hyped up about.
Yeah, and that's what I love too, because I can see the passion. But do you feel like you're going to, because I feel like you have the passion to be even teaching this, right? With your processes that you're developing right now. Do you see that in yourself, that you're going to start growing into maybe offering online courses at some point, or, you know, even, I don't know if it's masterminds or something like that, you know, for these people that find you that might need that guidance?
I'm not going to say no, but I think I'm still so young in this process of figuring it out. I'm still, so a lot, like as exciting as it is and as much success as I've had, I'm still struggling with this underground group mindset and the rest of the world. And so the traditional economic development mindset doesn't really have a place for entrepreneurs. And that's the big challenge. That's the big conflict. We have that saying that everybody says that small businesses are the backbone of the country. And yet that's like a lot of talk and not a lot of action. And so we don't treat entrepreneurs in local communities with this badge of honor and respect. We kind of treat them like second-rate citizens because, you know, they just don't fit into the world of big corporate agreements and contracts. They don't have the resources to have their HR person. They're wearing all of the hats. Right. And so they don't fit the mold. And so it's just one of those things where I want to show the work that is worth admiring, and why, like, my mother is Cuban and her family gave up everything to come to this country. Why? Because of the opportunity that is here and the people and the fact that we work ourselves. We want to take the American dream. We want to make that actually mean something. And that's really where entrepreneurship for me has been A lifesaver because it changed my life, but B, it has given me the opportunity to give back to others because I have such a passion for this topic.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit, because I feel like you've created this space on social media, right? You're creating even a slightly different space using a podcast. And now you're dominating like Clubhouse. You've got you don't have your club yet, but neither do we either, right? But you're maneuvering and you're kind of like going in and out and really trying to figure out, how is this new platform going to allow me and this passion and this idea to move forward? So talk about what you're doing on Clubhouse to now grow this, because I feel like Clubhouse is a little bit of a mix between Facebook, some kind of social media platform that we're used to, but now bringing in the podcast side of it, right? Because it's all audio. So what are you doing on Clubhouse to now use that platform to grow and to help entrepreneurs?
When I got on Clubhouse, I was in quarantine, so I had extra time on my hands. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have joined. Truly, because I'm so busy. I was like, I don't have time. So I understand those who are saying, I hate Clubhouse, I don't get it, or I don't have time for just another thing. But I had that time. And so luckily I was able to get in and connect with people like you and the others that we have in our family to see, oh my gosh, this is worth exploring. I need to spend my time here. Well, here's what I believe about relationships. One of the challenges that you have with social media is you have the social media flybys, right? You have the people who come in, they want to be heard, they want to say their thing, but then they're flying by to be heard in the next room and then the next conversation. And so I am committed to the relationships that I decide that I'm going to build. That is why you see me in your room every morning. That is why I'm a part of your conversations, because I'm not a flyby. I am a committed person. When I find my tribe, I want to be a part of that conversation. So what I did when I decided to join Clubhouse was I made it my personal mission to and I called all of the people around me, close to me, and I said, you need to get on Clubhouse, and here's why. Hear me out. Before you say no, you don't have any time. Let me tell you why. I want Clubhouse because Polk County is how it can be characterized by people, even ourselves sometimes. We're our own worst enemy. We will say that we're podunk Polk County. Or we'll say, so we are very, we're kind of a micropolitan. We're nestled between these two metropolitan cities, and we're not even a bedroom community. We're just unique. We're very special. And so as a person from this community, I see how much of laggards we are. So we were late to the game in adopting Facebook in our business world. We're late to the game on pretty much everything. And so I said, okay, as an innovator, as an early adopter, I want to raise the entrepreneurial vibe and make people go, wait a minute, what's going on in Polk County? There's all these people that are from Polk County, that are from Lakeland. Wow. And so I said, let's get on the scene. Let's make a splash. Let's let people know what a great, incredible, creative community we are. And so that's what I started to do. And so through that, I'm using the network that I currently have to start to utilize it, Clubhouse, for continuing the conversation and building whatever brand awareness we can around Polk County.
But now, did you get a lot of people from Polk County on Clubhouse?
There's a pretty good number. There's probably 100, 150, 200 right now. Like,
wow,
it's growing.
Wow, that's so cool.
But they're not all on for their own reasons.
Right.
So it's kind of hard because it's like we're pulling them away from what they really think they need to be doing.
Sure.
So I'm intentionally then now co-modding rooms with some people, saying, okay, what do you want to talk about? Let's co-mod a room. Let's get on this conversation so that they could start to internalize the value and see what it could possibly do for themselves. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, there has to be a value proposition for them to spend the time building, or doing anything on the app.
Yeah. Well, and then this comes back to you too. Like you constantly develop this collaboration among your community, right? The outside community, not inside, like on social media. But as a result, you're growing your community on social media and being able to connect to people that you wouldn't ever have been able to connect to, which that's what I love about social media, right? Is that you never know when you're going to connect to that one person or that 2 people or the 5 people or the 10 people that you're all of a sudden going, wow, like if I didn't spend my time here, like I would have never been able to connect to these people. So, that way, even though you're not using them for business, and it really is a collaboration of just like-minded individuals, do you see yourself using Clubhouse then more also for yourself, right? Because you're doing everything for people, but if you don't, we've learned this, if you don't feed yourself, right, that you're not going to be able to feed the other people that and provide some things for the community that you're building. So are you noticing that is also what you're getting as well?
Well, so the very fact that I'm on this show with you is the fact that I'm doing something for myself. This is the first time that I've ever guest podcasted on any show anywhere. I'm open to do it again and again and again because I want to share my message and I want to practice. I want to practice at what I'm sharing. But I am the person who gives the platform to everybody else. And so now I'm trying to adjust that slightly because I feel like nobody wants the platform to just be about me. That's why I admire so much what all of you are doing, because it is about sharing the stage. It is about sharing your stories. And so it's really just trying to model like, how do I get into that club, or how do I create a club that's similar to that model and then reciprocate, the same exact, repeat the same idea that you guys have created, because it's genius. And you have such wonderful, diverse thoughts and ways of sharing and expressing yourselves. So I really think at some point in time, what's going to be best for me is if I can get into a group of people that we consistently do what you guys are doing. And then that is how I want to grow my tribe and my brand and build, for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, It really was. I mean, we talked about this week too, about fate, or choice. And it really was both, but it really was crazy how we all came together. And I mean, from the start that, a couple of people exited, but that's okay as well. But the vibe, I mean, is just, I don't know what happened. I walked in and I literally said, okay, even though I wasn't going to, I was like, no, my word is released this year, and then on December 30th, of course, I pick up Clubhouse. And so I was like, I thought I was going to release things, which I did, but then I picked up Clubhouse, right?
Yeah.
But it's feeding me so much that it's one of those things that I'm super, super thankful for, But again, I want this to be about you, and I love learning about, what you're doing. Do you think that, if anybody's interested in maybe doing something like what you're doing, right? Or even being part of your Facebook group to see what you're doing and to kind of see if it's something that they want to do, how would they get involved?
So I would love to start coaching that very same thing. I haven't created a product. I don't have a plan yet. But very early on, a lot of people came to me and said, hey, I want to start an LBL, Lakeland Business Leaders, the original, in such and such a city. I want to do this over here. I want to do this over here. And I said, you guys, I'm still trying to figure out even how to make it sustainable. So it's not time for me to tell you how to do this because it's gonna fail. Like I still haven't figured it out yet. So I had several people approach me. I even had somebody, it was so funny, our old logo, if you go like to the Wayback Machine or whatever and see the Lakeland Business Leaders old logo, it's really like archaic at this point in time, right? But somebody had taken, so Lakeland is Swan City. We have a lake that the Queen of England dedicated or donated swans to us, and so we have her swans, and so they have their families, and so we have lots and lots of swans. So almost every logo in our city has some sort of element of a swan in it because that's just how we identify. So our original logo has swans, and somebody took our logo, and it was, I think, Edmonton, and maybe in Canada, and they turned the logo of the swans into beavers, and it was the exact same logo, but it was beavers instead of swans, and they said the Edmonton Business Leaders. So somebody actually took the whole exact thing, copied exactly word for word what we had done, just changed the name and changed the logo from swans to beavers. And so, yeah, there was a lot of people seeing the idea was valuable. And so, what is it? copying is the greatest compliment. So
right.
I didn't really worry about it, but I sent a cease and desist message and said, I think you should stop.
Well, especially if it's the exact same thing. I mean, but even so, I think, the Facebook group is private. Is that correct?
No, it's actually
it's
a public group.
one now. Okay. So people that are listening to this that want to see what you're doing can possibly go and actually check it out. And it's actually not called Lakeland, and it's actually called Bridge Local, right? Okay.
Yes, Bridge Local Public Forum is what it's called.
Okay, awesome. All right. So that way they can at least get connected and see what you're doing and maybe even reach out. I love that you're thinking about at some point, like you said, I totally get, you're not at the place to do it right now, but for a systems and process person, I'm hoping that you're taking notes exactly of what you're doing from start to finish and then seeing the results, right?
Yeah.
I learned that from
we definitely have a lot of notes.
But yeah, it's definitely something that I'm learning along the way as I'm developing new things and new ideas. So I love that. Is there like any type of projects or stories that you've done with this group that may have touched your heart? And, it really is the reason why you continue to give of your time this way. It's really your time and your energy, right?
Yeah. There are so many different stories. I think the one that I can just share that's the easiest to get your head around, every time we have a meet and greet, we have a nonprofit that we do a raffle and we give money to the nonprofit. And the nonprofit also has the opportunity to speak and kind of have some visibility in the business community. So, that entrepreneurs are a lot more things than just business owners. They go to churches, they have children in schools, their kids are playing Little League. They touch every single corner of your community. And so when there are these very small nonprofits that don't necessarily have budgets for marketing and they're not known around the community, we kind of lock arms with them and want to help get their stories told. So we'll give them that space. And that way, if there's a volunteer opportunity that a business owner wants to either, maybe their child needs service hours, or maybe they themselves want to become a participant and participate in the 5K or volunteer or do something. So it's additional exposure for donors, but also for people to get connected to the cause.
Wow.
And so we do that every single time. And it's not a whole lot of money that we end up raising. It's usually around $400, maybe $500 for each event. Mm-hmm. But it's just the opportunity to gain that additional exposure. Again, the platform allows us to tell the story of some of those untold stories that are still, underground.
Yeah. And I love how it just brings the community together, because anytime that you're working on something that is lifting something like a nonprofit up, right? I think that it really brings that community together, not only to learn a little bit more about something that is right in their backyard, and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that existed, but then also to really elevate that nonprofit. And sometimes the smaller nonprofits have such a difficult time, even raising that $400 to $500. And so it's something that's really nice to be able to do. And again, rally the community and have so many other outlets of, like what you said, right? Like maybe one of their kids needs some hours to get for school or whatever, for volunteer hours. And so it's really
and a lot of sorry.
No, go ahead.
A lot of times there are parents that will come on and say, my kid needs service hours. Mm-hmm. And so that's the beauty of the forum. It's the opportunity to connect to whatever. I mean, we had some of the craziest things that have, like, over the years, people have asked for. I mean, there was somebody who was broken down on the side of the road one day and said, hey, I'm broken down on the side of the road. Can somebody come and give me, help me?
Wow.
And
so they posted it in the group?
Somebody came and somebody came and helped them. They were locked out of, another person was locked out of their car. We have a locksmith that's a member, and they just were, I think it was a kind of a scary moment where I think maybe there were kids that were locked in the car or something like that. But like it's like super quick responses to people's needs, and they're being met in such a great, wonderful way. Why would anyone want to stop that?
Right.
Like, it's just such an empowering knowledge that things are happening and people are having their needs met. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's so true, because I've been part of like neighborhood Facebook groups as well, and as well as a very large Facebook group that has like over, I think, 30 or 40,000, right? And it really stands the test of time that group is are filled with those members that care about each other. And it's because of the engagement of the group, again, that trust is there. And so if you are broken down, like, you're really going to get somebody who's going to help you. You know, it's not going to be some weird, thing or anything like that. But I remember a group that I was in, the actual person who ran the group was driving, and this was Christmas Eve, and he ended up, he kind of stopped. This was after church, and he ended up stopping and seeing just a young kid with a big, huge garbage bag over his shoulder, and decided, like, at first he was like, I need to just keep going, right? I've got my son in the car and everything. I can't be picking up anybody, And he started to go his way, and I think the son saw, and the son said something like, Dad, are you going to pick up that kid that you saw, right? And it was a younger kid, and not young, but maybe like 18 or 19 or something like that. And so he turned around, picked him up, got him a meal, talked to him during the meal, took him to, Walmart, got the essentials, drove him. He was actually walking, I think it was 3 miles, and it was raining. And so actually drove him to where he was going. He was changing shelters. And then he said, you know what, I'm going to come back tomorrow on Christmas Day, or whatever it was. Well, meanwhile, on this Facebook group, he posted this whole story about, and he took a picture of his son, in a shopping cart at Walmart. And he posted it. Oh my gosh, I could not believe the amount of members that reached out. Okay, if he goes to this thing tomorrow, there's a job waiting for him. There was things like that, right? Wow. And it's like, I'm sending this, to you, the one who actually owns the group, not just to this kid, but and so what happened was there was this donation site, and it ended up being where he raised all this money, but he was the steward of the money for this kid that he had picked up, so that we didn't just give it to them.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he came back and shared how that money was spent and what's going on now, and it was a great just story, and really goes to show that the time and the energy that you put into developing a group that has this trust and has this community really is something, to be proud of. And, just again, going back to the consistency of you as a young Chrissanne, going to now the consistency of whatever passion, and this happens to be your passion, but this passion that you have to develop this community. And it's not just for you, it's for other people. I mean, I just absolutely love how the circle went full, around, and is using some of the things that you thought were bad in your life, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, I was a little brat, and but really it is you working that hard to bring that to other people, because you're consistent, and that's so important to you. So I love that.
Yeah, it feels good. It feels good to help people. It feels good to know that there are people who value the work that we're doing. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the story that I want everyone who's listening to think about is to inspire generosity is the greatest gift that you can give. So entrepreneurs, by their very nature, are generous. That is just what I have found. If the most successful entrepreneurs are people who have probably given back more than the fortune that they have earned, just by helping, whether it's through donations, but also through mentorship and through helping others through challenging times, or just picking up a kid on the side of the road one night because, it's just in us. And so generating more of that in our world and connecting a better world, as I'm here having this conversation with you, I believe the power within entrepreneurs is great. The opportunity within entrepreneurs is great. If we can unlock more of that for more entrepreneurs to succeed, we would have an exceptional world. So I really feel that strongly. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I have one last question, because I want to bring it back to you again. Okay. So I always love to ask this question, and I know that you've just dropped some wisdom, but if there's one piece, if you look back and you're like, okay, the young Chrissanne, like, there's no way I would have had, like, maybe at that time you're like,
I don't know if I would have ever been where I am right now, right? So what's one piece of advice that you are able to share with my listeners on just making the world a better place? No matter who you were at a young age, right? But what is the one piece of advice looking back now that you could say, hey, anybody can do this, right? I did this, and this is something that I'm passionate about. But what is that step that they need to take just to make this world a better place?
So I would say right at the very beginning, I had an idea and I took action. That was how this whole thing started. And I think I now can look back on it and feel like it was a nudge. I'll say it's a nudge from God, but you might say it's a nudge from the universe. And I would say my piece of advice would be to listen to those nudges. When this weird idea comes into your head and you say, well, that doesn't make any sense, or how would I make money doing that? Like, that's the biggest question sometimes people that shut people down from even trying to do something is like, it doesn't feel like I could ever monetize that. Well, forget the monetization for a minute. Think about the opportunity of what you can give to the world. And I love what Oprah has said, do what you love and the money will follow. And so doing what I love is where I have found my own success. Am I a millionaire? No. Do I even want to be? I don't think so, but that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to give back and to share the love that has been given to me so generously and pass that on and hopefully inspire others to pass that on and to keep passing it on. So that's the advice that I would give, is listen to the whispers, to the nudges that you're getting from the universe or from God, and take some action and do something. He's not putting those ideas in your head for you to push them aside. He's putting those ideas in your head for you to do something with them.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Connecting a Better World, and thank you, NoCo FM, for supporting this show. If you connected to something in this episode, we would love to hear from you. Our contact info will be listed in the show notes, as well as you can reach us on our social media channels. Please feel free to share our podcast with your friends and loved ones. For more shows, please tune in to noco.fm online.
This is Loudspeaker.